tried to reintroduce the academic study of religion onto the OSU campus. And she, I think, in my book, is a really great example of how the academic study of religion can really contribute to our understanding of robust understanding of culture, of religion, of identity, and she really embodies the best of the humanities. So I'm very happy to have her here. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Kabir.
All right, about that. So now we know that it's not working.
So Dr. Kabir is an anthropologist, she's an activist, and an artist. And there's really these three facets to her identity that combine in a unique way to make her such an amazing scholar. And she's been very generous to share all three of those facets of herself with us and her work today. So Dr. Kabir earned her PhD in anthropology from Princeton University in 2011. She's lived in many different parts of the world, including Puerto Rico, Morocco, Cairo, and Damascus. She's a native New Yorker, but did her fieldwork on the south side of Chicago. As I said, there are three parts to Dr. Kabir's professional identity, and the first is her activism. Even while in graduate school, she was developing an identity as a public scholar, investing her considerable talents in public service and in public policy, working for the U.S. Department of State, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, the Veer Institute of Justice, and the Inner City Muslim Action Network. And she continues this work now as a regular contributor to the Huffington Post, commenting on issues related to Muslims and race in public life. This afternoon, in her performance in the MU Ballroom, we saw the second facet of Dr. Kabir's identity in that she is also an artist. How many of you got to see her performance this afternoon? Okay, several of you. Her work combines movement, theater, and poetry to explore key themes in racial and religious identities of young Muslims in Chicago. And tonight, Dr. Kabir will share her formal scholarship with us of her identity as an anthropologist. In that role, she is an Assistant Professor of Anthropology and African American Studies at Purdue University, and her research examines how Chicago Muslim youth construct their religious, racial, and cultural identities at the intersection of hip-hop and Islam. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Abdul Khabeer.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation and such a kind and generous introduction. I'll have very good memories of Oregon and Oregon State University upon my return to the Midwest. Everyone's really kind and generous with their time. And so today, this lecture is speaking about this notion, this idea that I've termed Muslim cool. And so we're going to have a kind of a presentation and discussion on hip hop and Islam in America. So I want to begin with a little video that I have sort of created to illustrate something. And there will be audience participation. So pay attention to the video. And really, the question I'm going to ask for someone to, one or two people to kind of give us, to comment on is what story or what narrative do you see in the video? Okay? So now, I'm working at this, here we go. Okay, this should work.
Malcolm X. No sellout. Malcolm X. No sellout. Malcolm X. No sellout. Malcolm X. No sellout. You can't deny that. You may not like my say it, but you can't deny it. If you're afraid to tell the truth, why you don't even deserve freedom? Self is what you need to stop the war. If you don't get it, I'm held responsible. Crimes I make are designed to reach the youth. I gotta teach them, that's why I speak the truth. I waste time dwelling on the past and time you know. And we're the lost tribes back. Intelligent vibes on the mic, I will rise right in front of your eyes, just I am surprised. So I'ma let my knowledge be poured to a perfection. All praise to Allah, and that's a blessing. But knowledge itself, there's nothing I can't solve. At 360 degrees on the ball, but you sweet to make the crowd keep moving. Collect balls to the tip, saying how you change. But you were whistling that. No more dope games. I just got the phone call, heard you got there. Wanna go to the box, no time for females. I'm losing touch with my homie, he's a changed man. He hit the pen and now no sinning is the game plan. When I say I'm living large, all you see is the struggle. When I say I'm still thugging, all you see is the trouble. Congratulations on the win. I hope your wife knows she gotta play it for life. And everybody listen, I know you
Remember way back in the day, I was dreaming of my voice over radio waves, singing songs to the sky, knowing fate would obey, and destiny would put me where I'm standing today. I could never have known, I could never have guessed that success would turn out to be the ultimate test of my spirit, my heart, of my body and mind. What I'd have to let go and grab a piece of the shine. But it was all just a dream, it was just me. But in reality, my husband is an MC. Say he just gave birth to baby number 3, barely eating on tour, getting no sleep. And right before the show, when everybody's getting hype, I'm sitting backstage with my babies on Skype, just to let them know that I love them with a passion, praying that I can with my ass. I'm not a terrorist, more into extortion. I'm pro-life, but into track abortion, cause I'll kill this beat without leaving a portion. Won't give the cookies without reading the fortune. Can't pass me up, no I'm not Mike Vick, cause I'm wife material and never played a side chick. Grind so much, people call me cokehead, cause of all the dust that's sprinkled over my bread. Hardest working Muslim in the biz, 5 times 5, 5 job, 5 kids, 5 prayers a day, 5 times 10. What I made an hour while some pretend. Thankful for the blessings of my Lord, I won't deny. La ilaha illallah, I wear it till I die. Here to leave a legacy and imprint on this earth, and if I'm not doing that, then I should have died at birth.
walk out to sleep, not to force in the street. Bring pulse of these people in the heart of the beat. The dogs of the heat, bring it cause of the police. Take the sword of the sea, keep the balls on the sea. It's in it, we're here. Everybody let it put it in, we're here. Thank you next time for my soul. Thank you next time for my Lord. Knows me, knows, don't let me go. We are all just as good, higher than the allies. We are all Hamza, we are all Hammer, we are all Syrian, heads to the cemetery. United, we never be defeated. A view from a true peace perspective. These mic machines impose all the pressure. They appointed here to uphold justice, but they get denied, yo, they cheat and they lie for hate you, fake moves and wild hostile. Young black girl in the struggle for survival. Great stress and effect, disrespect, disconnect, judge the wise and skills and nice teeth. Shots of blood that break the night breeze. And 7 point the judge, it might be not see. Insecurity, identity, doubt. You think that they see a neighbor, they see a villain is out. They shooting, major die. The act as if the murder innocence is not crime. Killers on the wrong watch, make your time's up. I hope you hear this, right when you hide that. Trayvon, you Trayvon, Trayvon, you Trayvon.
Okay, so now it's your turn. So what story or what narrative were you able to gather from that little video montage? What did it say to you about the relationship between Islam and hip hop, if anything? Yes.
You kind of link the past with the problems going on now, I think?
Say that again. Link the past
Right.
with.
With the problems going on now and with the issues going on now.
Okay, so sort of like a historical continuum.
Right.
Yeah, so there's definitely part of what was happening. Sort of like, because it starts with, and just a little. So we started with the Malcolm X Don't Sell Out, which is a track from '83, right? Which is kind of excerpts of Malcolm X's speeches over breakbeats. And then we went to Kim Shabazz, who was a member of the 5% Nation, and we'll talk about who they are. And you see, sort of in that video, you saw the kind of the Hadra, like sort of it's a kind of a Sufi practice, right, to kind of bring the Prophet Muhammad's like sort of spirit to the room. So you saw some of that, and breakdancing, and then Rakim, who's Some people say he's the greatest MC. There's, there are debates about that. But Rakim is also a 5%er, and he's talking about questions of knowledge of self. So we'll see that. Then there was the reminders. So the woman who had the locks, who was talking about having kids, stuff like that. She's part of a duo, the Reminders, and they're a Muslim hip hop group from Colorado. And Najma 53 is part of that cypher that happened in Baltimore like last year. And she's from New York originally, but in Philly. And then the women who were dancing, their group called Muslims Don't Panic, and they're from Minneapolis. And the woman in the blue, she's a teacher, and the two girls, they're actually twin sisters, and they've been her students, and so they formed this ensemble together. And they're actually on Brother Ali, who's also a Muslim MC. He has his song Morning in America from his recently released album. They're featured on it too. So they did a performance at Taking to the Streets, this festival this past June. And then Omar Fendam, who was talking about Syria, and then Yassine Bey talking about Trayvon Martin. So those are who the characters were. Okay, now, so historical continuum. What other things did people see? Yes.
I think the effort to separate Muslim people from what media portrayal of their government and our government.
So can you say more about that? What do you mean?
Humanize.
Okay. So a story, you feel like the story kind of humanized Muslims. Okay, so Muslim story. Okay, one more person. What did you gather from the videos? Because we're doing a talk on Islam and hip hop, and 3 is the Sunnah, so I have to have a third person. And Sunnah means like the practice of the Prophet. Yeah.
The politics of gender.
In what way?
I noticed that one about the woman who was talking about the challenges she dealt with as a woman, like raising kids and having kids and motherhood.
Right, precisely. So what I was attempting to do by showing this video, right, is to give you both this sense of this historical continuum, right? Because one of the things I'm going to talk about today is the way in which we advertise this talk about thinking about Islam and hip hop, and how people might think that that's a weird sort of grouping, right? They're sort of thinking of hip hop and Islam as very different things, and so therefore sort of wondering how they can even kind of coexist. And so part of it is showing this historical continuum in terms of how old, right, the relationship between hip hop and Islam is. Another part of it is to show, I think, sort of humanity, right, to show kind of the variety of different ways in which that has manifested itself, right, in terms of the different types of people, types of story, thinking about women, particularly hip hop is this kind of male-dominated genre for many people, and so women are often marginalized in hip hop, which is true for Muslims who do hip hop as well, but to kind of think about, well, what does it mean for women to do that in the context of both the kind of patriarchy of hip hop, but also the patriarchy, right, of Muslim communities, because there's overlapping sort of systems that women who are artists are dealing with. And then also thinking about, if you talk about problems, right, sort of thinking about what is it about Islam and hip hop. And so what I'm going to talk about is part of that is about addressing problems. Part of that is about thinking about analyzing, interpreting, and offering a way to think about or think through sort of societal problems or issues. So to begin, this is going to be challenging. I'm going to try to do this here. We already, okay. So I use Prezi because I really love Prezi. So I use Prezi. So first I want to sort of give a little bit of a hip hop's Islamic history brief, right? So long gone are the days when hip hop was unknown, yet our understanding of hip hop has not necessarily grown. Many still think of it solely as rap, sort of this young black men rapping about crime and violence and women, yet rap is only one of the elements of hip hop. And I call it emceeing, that goes along with the other elements, b-boying, which you may be more familiar with in terms of breakdancing, graffiti, and DJing. Yet hip-hop is, of course, even more than these foundational elements, but it also encompasses related cultural productions such as language and fashion. And while it is true that young black men crying through gold-tooth pain is a part of hip-hop, multiple meanings of hip-hop coexist. So hip-hop can be sort of base and vacuous, and an oppositional culture at the same time. Now, hip-hop genealogies extend backward in time for generations and crisscross what scholars call the Black Atlantic, so namely sort of Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Yet for most, the story of hip-hop begins in the ravages of the 1970s South Bronx. And so hip-hop anthems, like The Message, emerged as a response to these conditions. So this is just a little clip from The Message. And Okay, we'll just keep going. Broken glass everywhere, People pissing on the stairs, you know, they just don't care. I can't take the smell, I can't take the noise, got no money to move out, I guess I got no choice. Rats in the front room, roaches in the back, junkies in the alley with the baseball bat. I tried to get away, but I couldn't get far because a man with a tow truck repossessed my car. Don't push me because I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a dimple sometimes makes me wonder how people going under. And that was by the Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. And this is one of those hip hop anthems that describe the result of urban renewal policies that resulted in severe unemployment, the loss of quality housing and public services, and the flight of private investment in an area like the Bronx, but also all over New York City. And as the 1970s closed and the age of crack began, hip-hop, amplified the voices of urban folk, black, brown, poor, and immigrant, that the state had dismissed as pathological. In hip-hop, they responded to official abandonment with creativity and that reflected harshness and joy. Yet the story of hip-hop is not just a reaction to poverty. Hip-hop is a cultural phenomenon whose styles, sounds, and symbols are rooted in the creative energy of diaspora, the involuntary African diaspora of the Middle Passage and 20th century migrations from the English and Spanish-speaking Caribbean and Latin America to the United States. As Trisha Rose notes, through the manipulation of breakbeats and sampling, hip-hop is a sonic echo of the Afro-diasporic musical priorities of repetition and rupture. MCing grows out of traditions of toasting and signifying from the American South and the Caribbean, and before pre-recorded tracks, this boasting and braggadocio took place in ciphers, which are battlegrounds for freestyle rapping and b-boying. And so Joe Slosh reminds us that the cipher, the circle of onlookers as a competitive dance space, is a well-documented history, having been used throughout the African diaspora for dance, thereby situating b-boying like the Brazilian capoeira and Martinique Naja in traditions of Afro-diasporic battle dance martial arts. And the story of hip-hop is also about politics, namely how Black and Latina and Latino communities negotiate in the social, political, and economic contradictions that define the post-civil rights era. By the time hip-hop was being born, Islam had reclaimed its space as a part of the nomenclature of Black spiritual and political life in the U.S. And so we know that estimates of enslaved Africans that came to the U.S., estimates are around 30% or so were Muslim when they arrived to the continental U.S. And we know this through the documented life histories of individuals like Omar ibn Said, Abdullahi Ibrahima, and Salih Bilali. But the realities of enslavement, of course, limited the ability to practice and pass on Islam on a communal level, like many other African traditions. So Islam reemerges, which is why I use the term Islam sort of reclaiming its space in the early part of the 20th century by way of interactions between two groups of migrants. So you have Black American migrants coming from the Deep South during the Great Migration to cities in the North and the Midwest, and also Muslim migrants coming from the Middle East and South Asia, and they're meeting in in American cities. And it's through those interactions that Islam as a tradition of Black American life, which I call Black Islam, comes to be. Oh, really? Okay, well there are photos there that indicate the different groups. I'm not sure what's happening today, but no matter. So anyway, so I use the term Black Islam to refer to the broad range of expressions of the Islamic traditions in Black communities in the U.S. This includes the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, the Moorish Science Temple, the Nation of Islam, or NOI, the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths, as well as Sunni and Shia Orthodoxy. Each has a different relationship to the intellectual and spiritual traditions developed throughout Islamic history, and given their approach to scripture, many Orthodox Sunni and Shia Muslims identified the Ahmadiyya, the NOI, and the Moorish Science Temple and the 5%ers as unorthodox or even un-Islamic. And in the 5% community, there's an internal debate too about whether or not they consider themselves or should be considered Muslims. Nevertheless, despite these debates on heterodoxy, it is essential to underscore what links these articulations of Islam to each other and to Black American history and contemporary life. These traditions of Black Islam share a pointed concern with the realities of Black communities living in conditions of systemic inequality. These traditions respond to conditions of injustice by articulating through Islam alternative cosmologies, politics, and social norms geared toward individual and community empowerment. Furthermore, in these traditions, Islam is a critical link and the genealogical narratives that connect present-day African Americans to a past that is not limited by the myth of Black inferiority perpetrated by white supremacy. And so this is a past that predates the transatlantic slave trade by meaningfully linking Black Americans to Africa and to Asia into a transnational Black identity. The ethics and philosophies of these traditions of Black Islam were evident in the Black radical tradition and Black arts movements of the 60s and 70s, and had taken root in Black communities. So in many ways, Islam was in the air, right, when hip hop was coming to be, so to speak. And so it's not surprising that Islam, Black Islam, was also picked up by the hip hop generation. And in fact, journalist Harry Allen has described Islam as hip hop's official religion. And so I sort of extending his assertion to argue that Islam, particularly Black Islam, is the central to the ethics of hip hop. I'm not sure if things are going to come together, right? So Black Islam's influence on hip hop can be traced to the Nation of Islam. And while many are familiar with the NOI's message of social justice and community empowerment embodied in figures like Malcolm X, I want to focus more on the leader, Elijah Muhammad, and his explication of this idea of knowledge of self, which I believe has been seminal to hip hop. Right. So in his exegesis, Muhammad makes an argument for knowledge of self that makes it a central tenet, in fact, a divine right of the human being, that when coupled with righteousness leads to peace, happiness, and equality. In the particular case of the community he was concerned with, African Americans, this kind of knowledge was essential to undo centuries of miseducation that had led many Blacks to believe in their inferiority in relationship to whites. The journey toward knowledge of self is designed to change the way individuals think. Namely, that Black people, and this is important here, think in terms of self and their own kind, which leads to the creation of Blacks as a, quote, industrious and self-independent, unquote. This kind of thinking is meant to reorient Black people toward shaping of a community that is autonomous and envisions Black people as subjects and creators of their own destiny. In this way, knowledge of self then cultivates an awareness of self and the social world, acting directly to change the conditions of what they would have called so-called Negroes. This philosophy of knowledge of self, or self-knowledge, has been particularly influential in hip-hop. Many added to emceeing, b-boying, DJing, and graffiti as hip-hop's fifth element. It is this pursuit of knowledge of self that has shaped the activist and ethical core of hip-hop. And so, for example, speaking about the influence of the Nation of Islam on him, Afrika Bambaataa, one of hip-hop's founders, says, "They, NOI, held the teachings of you're not a nigga, you're not colored, wake up Black man and Black woman and love yourself. Respect your own, turn back to Africa." That started sticking with a lot of brothers and sisters. It stuck in my mind and heart. I said I have to do some kind of change to get the mindset of the masses that was following me to lead to another way. So this is a quote from Bambaataa that's reported by Jeff Chang, and so he describes how iconically Black Islam shapes hip-hop ethics. Because Bambaataa, in addition to his signature musical contributions to hip-hop, he trailblazes hip-hop's possibilities as an organized social movement. So inspired by the messages of the Nation of Islam, he transforms a street organization or gang he was a part of called the Black Spades into the Zulu Nation. And the Zulu Nation has been really foundational and formative to hip hop, both in terms of being a space for people to collectively organize. So whether people are directly a part of Zulu Nation or people like Bambaataa who are part of Zulu Nation are influencing, that. So that Zulu Nation has been really sort of formative around this kind of ethical tradition in hip hop. And so likewise, I also spoke with a hip hop legend who's also a Muslim, Jorge Popmaster Fable, who's the founding member of the Rocksteady Crew, which is a foundational b-boy collective, and he's also a member of the Zulu Nation. So he depicted the critical role of Black Islam to hip hop ethics. So in his earliest recollections of Islam and hip hop, years before his own conversion, he recalled, DJ Afrika Islam, they call him the son of Bambaataa because he was similar to Bam in playing rare selections, and he had a similar DJ style. He would DJ on the radio on WHBI, and he would play breakbeats. And he was on the radio show, which is a Zulu Beat show, host, and he would play excerpts from Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X speeches, Elijah Muhammad, Farrakhan. DJ Afrika Islam would take little sound bites, and you would hear a breakbeat over it, someone saying Assalamu Alaikum, and the response was Walaikum Assalam. And the Supreme Team, which was a hip hop group at the time, would Just Allah the Superstar and Say the Mind the Mastermind, and they were on the radio, part of a show in '82. They would make references to the 5%, always would end their show with words of wisdom for life, which is cool and would have some Islamic ideas. The Supreme Team played a role in inserting Islamic concepts and words on the radio, on the airwaves. And they will also point to other tracks, like the first one you heard, Malcolm X No Sellout, and The Message. He called them warning songs that were an extension, according to him, that were an extension of the proper Islamic tradition. And so his turn of phrase, warning songs, is a clear allusion to the Islamic concept found in the Quran that the Prophet Muhammad was sent to warn humanity. So for example, in chapter 79, verse 44, it says, "You," speaking to Prophet Muhammad, "are but sent to warn those who stand in awe of it," which is the day of judgment. And so what's important about this kind of idea of fable seeing hip-hop as an extension of proper Islamic tradition is a way it comments on, or we can think about, what Black Islam means and what sort of heterodox movements like the Nation of Islam mean, right? Because where there are definitely areas where the Nation of Islam's teaching diverges from what we consider orthodoxy, there are places where it does it, many places, and knowledge itself is one of them. So for example, so this is a quote from Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, who was a really famous 12th century Islamic sort of reformer, philosopher, scholar, right? And he, as you see, so this is he has a book called The Alchemy of Happiness. And the first chapter of The Alchemy of Happiness is called Knowledge of Self, right? And he talks about knowledge of self is key to the knowledge of God, right? According to the saying, he who knows himself knows God. And as it was written in the Quran, we will show them our signs in the world and in themselves that the truth may be made manifest to them. So what's really interesting about that sort of link is how, again, so to think about hip-hop in Islam and to think about the ways hip-hop is shaping, Islam is shaping hip-hop ethics through articulation of Islam from sort of Black American Muslims, but also really also being tied to or connected to this broader super sort of tradition of Islam. And so then along with the Nation of Islam, the 5% Nation of Gods on Earth is also part of the primary chain of transmission, and I'm using that phrase, chain of transmission on purpose, of the concept of knowledge of self in hip hop. So the teachings of the 5% are structured around a practice of breaking down numbers and words in order to reveal their deeper meanings on a path knowledge of self. This kind of linguistic deconstruction required by these teachings is a definitive contribution of the 5% Nation to hip hop music and culture. This emphasis on mastery of words has been instrumental in setting the standards of rhetorical eloquence and wordplay in hip-hop lyricism. And the list of MCs who are also 5%ers is an impressive one, so including people like Rakim, who you saw, as well as groups Brand Nubian, Poor Righteous Teachers, and innovators like the Wu-Tang Clan. And we also see the influence of the 5% in hip-hop language. So phrases commonly seen in hip-hop songs, for example, "What Up God," "Dropping Science," and "Word is Bond" comes directly from 5%er lessons. So "What Up God" is taken from the belief of the divinity of the Black man, "Dropping Science" reflects an emphasis on learning and sharing knowledge, and "Word is Bond" represents a value for an ethic of trustworthiness in word and deed. So in hip-hop, the pursuit of knowledge of self emphasizes being well-informed about the past, particularly alternative histories that privilege the hidden transcripts of marginalized people, so to know the self outside of the stories you've been told, and to be keenly attuned to contemporary racialized, class, and gender oppression, and this historical continuum, a continuum between sort of past forms of oppression and contemporary subjugation, so to know the self in time. Knowledge of self then becomes this ethical position vis-a-vis other human beings, animals, the natural world, and notions of the divine that engenders a commitment to social justice through personal transformation and direct action. And it is this configuration of social justice through personal transformation and direct action, which is why figures like Malcolm X loom so large in hip hop. And so this is just a little sort of, okay, well, and the pictures are actually right here. There was a photo of a DC artist, Wale, on the cover of the Source magazine, who had this sort of iconic sort of Malcolm X figure. So he was he had a black sort of short brim hat, the sort of spectacles, a white shirt with a tie, and he had the silver ring of the Nation of Islam star and crescent on it, right? So he did that. Then here was this iconic photo of KRS-One, who's also a hip hop legend, where he recreates the photo of Malcolm X after the bombing. So by any means necessary, you may have seen this as a picture of him looking out a window with a machine gun, and so, or rifle rather, and so KRS-One is sort of doing the same thing, but he has on like a cap and a hoodie, and he has like a machine gun, right? So there's this way in which Malcolm X is evoked over and over again because of the way he embodies knowledge of self as this righteous opposition. And Malcolm is also often seen as, this black nationalist, in which his spirituality is removed from his story, but Malcolm was also a Muslim. This picture, which is probably not going to come up, but he was also a Muslim, and it was his faith that inspired his commitment to black liberation, which then inspires hip hop. Thus, while often ignored in mainstream conversations on hip hop, questions of faith, ethics, and spirituality, Islam, right, is central to hip hop's narrative. So indeed, right, Malcolm X was no sellout, as the song said, and he has become a signifier for black resistance, for Islam, for righteous opposition, which made him cool, right? And it is at this intersection, right, of blackness, cool, and Islam that I encountered in my own fieldwork what I call Muslim cool. This way of being and thinking about American Muslimness through which hip hop is central. And so Muslim cool is a practice, right? It's something people do. And it's also a perspective, a paradigm, it's a way of thinking that takes a countercultural stance that is never absolute in reference to different yet overlapping systems of social norms, namely white American normativity and the hegemony of the ethno-religious norms of Middle Eastern and South Asian American Muslim communities. Now, white American normativity, I'm assuming we're pretty kind of familiar with, so I'm gonna look a little bit, I wanna illustrate what this second set of norms looks like with these two sort of brief ethnographic vignettes. So, as stated, this way of thinking and being is informed by hip hop, and as a result, blackness as an identity, discourse, and place, the hood, the city, and the suburb, are critical resources in the negotiation of religious identity. So for one of my interlocutors, Latifa, this meant finding the hood jab style cool, and I'll explain what that is later. Well, Latifa is a 20-year-old African-American Muslim artist and activist. She comes from a working class background and was raised a Muslim by her mother, who was a single parent and a convert to Islam. So when it came to this headscarf style, which is a scarf wrapped in a bun, she said to me, it seems cooler when I wear it. It seems cooler to me, and I feel blacker when I wear it. And so Latifa usually wrapped her scarf around the edges of her face, but had been playing around with the idea of wearing this kind of hood jab style more regularly, much to the chagrin of her close Arab American Muslim friends. Because these friends evaluated that style based on the stylistic practices of the Chicago Arab community, where the style Latifa typically wears, sort of pinned under her chin, was the norm. And so therefore her friends felt that the hood jab did not meet the requirements of proper hijab. Latifa explained, they were bagging on me. I was actually thinking of wearing it like that, back and tied up, and they were like, no, you're going to hell. Later, while I'm in the field with her, one summer I attended this small girl party with her held at the home of one of her Palestinian American friends. And because Latifa, being a black woman, but most of her friends were usually Palestinian, so she often found herself being the only black person in the room, so to speak. Of course, at this party, that wasn't true because there were three of us. It was her, me, and another young African American woman. And so, so the girl party, as I've come to know in American Muslim communities, is kind of a social event held in homes, rental halls, and it's not this place where Muslim women, with their hair out, down, and kind of be free in an all-women environment. And every girl party I've attended, central to that is dancing, all right? And this party is no exception, and dancing, specifically belly dancing, commenced as soon as the host played some contemporary Arab pop music. So Latifa and I began to dance, and we danced with skill, surprising to those around us and to each other, since we had never danced with each other before. And I really enjoyed dancing, but I began to feel really uncomfortable as all of the Palestinian women who were dancing kind of moved out the way and sat down, including the Palestinian immigrant mother host, to kind of watch what I felt was this kind of spectacle of the black dancing girl, or the black dancing body. And my discomfort rose as I began to consider our dancing in the context of this black entertaining body, as well as the history of black slavery in the Middle East. And so as I eased off the dance floor, I made this comment in kind of jokingly to Latifa, and she joined me. And so why am I bringing this up? So what does it mean to dance as black and Muslim female bodies in the context of the Chicagoland basement party? And why would wearing a scarf and a bun send you to hell? So, and I want to be clear about something here. So Latifa loved her friends and valued them, and they loved her too. So this is not, they're not hating on each other, but their love wasn't able to escape, but didn't shield them from the complications of race and discourses of anti-blackness that circulate in Muslim American communities. And so to her friend, Islamic meant these kind of practices that embodied a proper Arab-American femininity. So it was, their sense of propriety was displayed in how they wore their scarves, as well as where they held their bodies and tongues, right? They attempted to embody this kind of quiet modesty, which is implicitly in contrast with the images of Black womanhood that predominate in the US popular imagination, that is louder and more aggressive, and also implicitly non-Muslim, as American non-Muslim. And so while Latifah loved her friends, she also seemed to long for Blackness. Latifah's longing for Blackness occurred in this local Chicago context, which mirrors the broader US context in which African American Muslims continuously or routinely complain of experiencing anti-Black racism and the marginalization of the Black Muslim expression of Islam at the hands of non-Black co-religionists. And so Latifah addressed this longing, and this is where the practice of Muslim cool comes up, through style and the body, using hip-hop and what John Jackson Jr. describes as a practice of, quote, racial performativity to shore up social identity. So Latifah performed Blackness as Muslimness. So as an artist, she drew on a hip-hop practice whose performative stance, elocutionary style, and body movement is rooted in Black expressive culture. As an activist, Latifah engaged in efforts that centered on Blackness and Black people, and she also engaged in this racial performativity in her consideration of the hijab. So about this hijab. I have this great photo of J-Lo in the hijab. So, yeah, it's fantastic. But anyway, so J-Lo's there, it's pink, it's in the back red, she's like a silver earring here, right? Okay. So how did I learn about, I learned this phrase, the hijab, while staging the first production of Sample, which I did earlier today. So in preparation for this vignette on Muslim women's headscarf styles, I spoke to this young woman named Noreen, and I was asking her if she would play what I was calling the hip-hop hijabi. So the hip-hop hijabi had on a scarf tied in a bun, and she had like a keffiyeh scarf, and this Che Guevara t-shirt, and jeans, and sneakers, and some headphones, you know. So I was like, oh, can you play this hip-hop hijabi style? She said to me, yeah, I can do that, but you shouldn't call it a hip-hop hijab, you should call it hood jabby. And I'm like, hood jabby? Where does that come from? So she's like, well, I was working at the center at a prestigious university in the Northeast, and my white supervisor said to me, you're so hood, I'm gonna call you hood jabby. So that's where the term came up. Now, incidentally, Noreen hails from an upper middle class suburb outside of Chicago, and she is Pakistani American, but the term, so the term hijab was likely invented by Noreen's supervisor in a somewhat offhand manner, right? Yet, the associations made between Blackness, class, and religion through hip hop, right, really are illustrative of this kind of thinking about this notion of Muslim cool. So for Latifah, right, this style, this kind of scarf to the back style, is cool to her or attractive because it's a staple of the hip hop aesthetic, and so that's why I had J-Lo up there. We can debate whether or not she's really hip hop, but I do think that, you know, she invokes that, right, particularly in that photo. And so this style has been embraced by hip hop heads through the incorporation of Afrocentricity and Black nationalism in hip hop, right? Yet the style is also accessible for Latifah and other Muslim women who are non-Black as a religious headdress, a practice of Blackness as Muslimness, because while the term hijab is not one that's used by Black Muslim women, so don't go see someone and say, hey, you know, how do you wrap that hijab? You might get, but the style, however, is something that Black Muslim women have brought into the American nomenclature of pious dress. As Carolyn Rouse argues, when African American Muslim women adopt the headscarf, they, quote, author a new female aesthetic, unquote, that responds to God's call for modesty and rejects the beauty standards articulated by white supremacy. And what's particularly instructive about this meaning of hijab is that a tradition of female modesty that recuperates Afro-diaspora dress as Islamic, in distinction from Arab and South Asian models of hijab, is precisely this recuperation and resistance of multiple hegemonies that makes this scarf style, whatever we want to name it, a practice of Muslim school. Muslim cool. This scarf style operates in a field of competing notions of Muslimness where other headscarf styles, particularly those of the modern Middle East, are hegemonic, reunifying a common Arab/Islamic conflation and debasing one of its undersides, Black/un-Islamic. Thus, Muslim cool as style is also a meaningful means of distinction in the broader contestation over American Muslim identity. Whereas the ethno-religious norms of South Asian and Arab American Islam establishes its authoritative notion of Muslimness through the exclusive legitimacy of historically situated practices of Islam born outside the U.S., Muslim cool counters with ways of thinking about and being an American Muslim that is made legitimate through historically situated practices of Black Islam. So this challenge constructs an important loop that reinforces the contemporary Muslim claim to American identity and also sort of comments on ideas of what is Islamic orthodoxy. So now I'm going to turn to the story of Yahya. Yahya is a 20-something second-generation Arab-American, an engineer by training. Yahya was also a visual artist and an activist at a prominent local Muslim nonprofit. Raised in an Arab Muslim enclave in a predominantly white middle-class Chicago suburb, Yahya was dissatisfied with what he saw as a lack of activism in his suburban Muslim community. Thus, as a college student, Yahya was eager to be socially active among Muslims and had volunteered as a graphic artist for this Muslim nonprofit for about 5 years when I met him. In his commentary on Islam in Chicago, Yahya echoed critiques of these ethno-religious norms of South Asian and Arab American Muslims that I have encountered frequently in the field. This critique argued that both ethnocentrism and anti-Black racism fuel these norms, thereby perpetuating not only an exclusive notion of what is authentically Islamic, but Muslim complicity and structures of dominance in the U.S. In contrast, Islam, interpolated through hip-hop, provided a meaningful alternative. So Yahya explains, in high school, I read a lot of Black Panther literature, Eldridge Cleaver, Mumia, and I wasn't a part of that 60s struggle, but reading it, you identify with it on different levels. You just swap the words Black with Muslim or Palestinian, and it all becomes very relevant. Through hip-hop, I did validate my own Islam. It no longer felt like I was, apart from something greater. Because through hip-hop, it was like you always heard Islamic references in their rhymes, and it was like, I'm recognized. Listening to a lot of hip-hop music about being conscious simplified Islam for me. And the prophetic tradition is very simple as well. The prophet's attributes were not how long his beard was or how short his throat was. What's really relevant is that he was compassionate, truthful, and an honest human being. And if Muslims understood that, then we would no longer be bound by these things. Say this, pray in this order, your wudu is invalid if you do it this way. No, what matters is that you can focus on these things. Being passionate, truthful, honest, sincere, just. And it's the same thing with hip hop. What they're really looking for is for people to be understanding, compassionate, truthful, and just. It's like the RZA said, and this is a 5% thing I like to carry around. You need knowledge, wisdom, understanding, justice, freedom, equality, love, peace, and happiness. And in that order. And that makes perfect sense. To have the understanding of how to get justice, freedom, and equality is fundamental for you to be happy, successful, to have love, peace, and happiness. So for Yahya, Blackness in the African American struggle for liberation became the means through which he understood his own position as a racial minority and a religious minority as an American Muslim. Critically, it was hip-hop's ethic of knowledge of self through which he discovers what he considered the core essence of Islam, and an alternative notion of Islamic piety which marries personal transformation with direct action. So like a hip-hop sample, Muslim cool is composed through what I call the loop of knowledge of self. Returning to Yahya's reflection, what he said, is like the RZA said, you need knowledge, wisdom, understanding, justice, freedom, equality, love, peace, and happiness. This citation is deeply significant because like a sample that is looped to create a musical track, Yahya repeats these words and others throughout his commentary. This speaks not only to the importance of these ideas of his own conception of Muslimness, but to the ways in which knowledge of self, as transmitted through the 5% and the Nation of Islam, has had a profound impact on Muslim cool. This loop of knowledge of self makes indirect commentary on orthodoxy or what counts as Islam. In my interlocutors are pretty clear of what traditionally stands as Islam, namely the oneness of an omnipresent God and the finality of the prophet of the body of Muhammad ibn Abdullah, who was born in the 7th century. So they did not seek to include, for example, the 5% under the umbrella of this orthodoxy, but they did see them as a legitimate resource because of Black Islam, through which they can interpret their own Muslim identity, their Muslim cool. And while other Muslims might object to this kind of incorporation, it is critical to note that the idea that a Muslim would do knowledge of self, as we've seen, right, through Al-Ghazali's quote, is a central part of Sunni and Shia orthodoxy. And that and through multiple references in the Quran and the tradition of Prophet Muhammad, that charge human beings to reflect, consider, and contemplate the natural world. These directives are designed to put the human being's capacity to reason to use as a means for reaching spiritual awareness. This is precisely, of course, how Elijah Muhammad explicates knowledge of self. Thus, because these young Muslims and many others are learning and pursuing knowledge of self through hip-hop, which appropriate the philosophy from Black Islam, as a result, sort of these, so you have the two, right? So kind of hip-hop is knowledge of self, and then knowledge of self teaches it to these Muslims who then kind of go back, right? So kind of beginning in Islam and returning to it. So as a result, these young Sunni Muslim activists and harping the Muslim cool, many of whom do not have an NOI lineage, they don't have any direct connection to the movement, are recovering knowledge of self as once again central, not only to the story of Islamic hip-hop, but American Muslim identity. And to conclude, right, the self-making of these young Muslims engage in is invigorated by hip-hop and is a move toward blackness, underscoring the ways blackness and black bodies play a key role in the configuration of American Muslim identity and practice. The move toward blackness has important implications for this American Muslim community in Chicago and nationally that is marred by anti-black racism, which makes the use of hip-hop to understand Islam and make claims about Muslim identity and piety very significant, right? It should be noted that in this move toward blackness, the performance of blackness never ceases to be haunted by some ghosts of minstrelsy's past, yet it is not overdetermined by it. This performance is neither wholly insidious nor a reflection of a kind of supermarket aisle cultural appropriation, because it's not a fad. Rather, through Muslim cool, relationships to blackness, black people, and hip-hop are mediated through faith and activism. Thank you.